Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the 200th episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. As you know, this is, because I just said it, this is the 200th episode, and it's a very special one. And we were just kind of like sitting down as a team wondering, what do we want to do for this episode? And so we thought it'd be a really fun idea to have me be interviewed on the podcast to celebrate this awesome milestone. And we've heard so many great things, great feedback and compliments between the conversations that I've been having with Rachel, our COO, on the podcast. And I figured, like, why don't we have Rachel come on and interview me? And so that's what this episode is all about. Thank you guys, every single one of you, for all the downloads, all the listens, all the reviews that you have given over the last couple of years. When we started this podcast, I had no idea what I was doing. And to be honest with you, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing with this podcast, but it has grown about 10 times the amount since we've originally started. And that just warms my heart. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to give you a virtual cheers to another 200 episodes. And with that, Rachel, welcome. Thank you. And I'm just going to throw it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm honored to be here celebrating this milestone with you. Do you know that the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast has a global ranking of the top 1% of all podcasts across all categories?
I did not know that. I very rarely look at the stats. I just know download numbers. That's awesome, though. What a great thing to have accomplished. I love it.
It is. You should be proud of yourself.
Yeah, I'm proud of us, proud of the team.
I am too. And it is a team effort. And this episode is also a team effort in the sense that we asked students inside of our Facebook groups, we asked listeners on our social accounts what questions they want to ask you. And we got a bunch of questions, really great questions. And we can't answer all of them because there's just too many to go through, but I have kind of curated the highlights. And some of them really, there was several questions around certain themes, certain topics, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we're going to dive into those.
Cool.
And they're kind of all over the place. Most of them are about the business, but some of them are not. So just kind of be ready.
Did you throw your own questions in there too?
I did not. I thought about it. Rachel. I have a couple.
Rachel, anyone can get up here and just ask questions that students ask. I want some Rachel Duffy questions in here.
Well, here's the truth about Rachel Duffy. I'm inherently lazy. And
that's not true.
No, but this was a shortcut. I asked people, what do you want to know? And so we're going to give the people what they want, Brandon. Isn't that the whole point?
All right. Well, I'm sure you'll dive in. Maybe some ideas will spark and stuff like that. So.
Yes, I did throw some in there.
Cool.
See if you can spot them. No.
Probably can't.
So I'm just going to start with like more of a big picture question. Sure. What is a week in the life of Brandon Lucero? Like, how many hours a day do you work? What does your week look like? What do you focus on?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different during every quarter, every period. It's like when the kids, when my kids are off school, it's a lot different because it's like they're here at the house and then I want to go do things. So I probably work less hours in the summer. And honestly, like, I just have to give the team and especially Matt a lot of credit because, over the last like 2-3 years, I went through some really hard things. Just like, I like to call them shamanic deaths. I know other people call them like dark nights of the soul, where it's just like a shedding of your old self and old what was, and a rebirth of something new. And in so many different forms. So it was like, like Taylor had left, who was our old CEO of Integrator, who helped me basically from like in debt to build the company up to where it was. She had left for another job opportunity. And then the model that we had been using for a really long time changed almost directly after that, the business model. And then I moved from California, which we had been living my entire life, to Arizona, which was a big shift and change. And then we had to shift schools like 6 months in. So our kids like had to go from school to school to school, which was tough. So emotionally and mentally, I have probably been the least present in the business than I ever have over the last 2 or 3 years, mainly because I just could, like, it wasn't because I just was like, hey, I'm going to take a break. It was like, I just couldn't get myself to that spot. And then I was just trying to adapt to this new place we're living in and making sure my family was okay. And that's why I have to give the team, and especially Matt, a lot of credit, because Matt took a lot of that responsibility of a lot of the role that Taylor had. And so, Julie and Brittany did as well. And so with that being said, my hours were like cut back in the business because I had to focus on a lot of that stuff. But I would say since that moment, an average day, I'm working 4 to 6 hours a day, probably. But the way I like to look at it and the way I describe it to Jacqueline is like, when I'm there, it's like high functioning work. It's like our content, it's training for the students, which mentally it takes a toll. So it feels like, yeah, I'm only working 4 hours, but when I'm done, I'm like, I feel like I just worked an 8-hour day. And so, and then I need the mornings too. I need the mornings to just like, rest and be with the kids and bring them to school and do that sort of thing as well. And it takes me a really long time to like get moving in the mornings now. So I usually don't start work till 10. And I try to be done by like 3 or 4 usually in most days. But like a week, that's pretty much what a work week would look like for me, is just kind of like getting up, getting the kids ready for school, unless Jacqueline's taking them. And then I make coffees for Jacqueline and I. So I make a latte, for her. And then I make an espresso or Americano for me, do my work. And then it's just like family time. I cook meals for my family every night. Jacqueline doesn't do any of the cooking. So usually what I do is I do all the cooking. And then while she's doing a lot of the bedtime stuff, baths and stuff, I do the cleaning as well. And then we both do bedtime. And then after that, we're just either together or we're doing our own thing. And then sometimes I'll work at night because I love working at night. And that's it. And then weekends are usually family time. So yeah, that's about it.
Sounds like a pretty amazing balance you have there, actually. I
Yeah.
never even realized it. I mean, I kind of knew this because I know you, but now hearing you kind of lay it out, I'm like, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah. I mean, when you have kids, it's like, I mean, this obviously, but for us, when it's like 4 o'clock, kids are home. It's like we try to do like a family walk, and then I'll do like the cooking, and then it's like sit down at the dinner table, and it's like we all have conversations, we eat, and then we have our rituals. So we do like just like with the team, we do gratefuls every night, so that we talk about things we're grateful for. And then my kids love to do animal of the day. So it's like this thing where you sit down at the dinner table and everyone guess what's the animal of the day today. And we have a Google thing. So we go, hey, Google, what's the animal of the day? And every day it's something different. So we always try to guess at what that is. And then we just have conversations, and it's like bedtime, bath time. But that's like a 5 hour, like I probably spend more time with that than I do at work sometimes, because it's like 4 to 9, and then by the time you're done with lunches and cooking and cleaning, and I hate to say it, but like I look at people like James, like one of my best buds, and like anytime he complains about not having enough time, I'm like, dude, I don't want to hear it. I have a 5-hour block that just sucks my energy, and I can't do anything else,
Right. And it's not even just the time of it, because even when you're not actively physically with the kids, the mental load of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not one of those things where like, that's okay. I could be like an hour late to school pickup. Like,
Right.
there's just no margin.
Yeah. Well, then I also have my other rituals and stuff, like my meditations that I want to do every day. And I try to do those at night too. So there's just a lot, it's just, I'm just in a busy time, a busy
It
period
is.
of life.
I was just having this conversation with my husband, who was telling me like, it's just been extremely busy lately. And I told him,
Mm.
you know something? Let's have an honest moment. We say that all the time. We've been
Yeah.
saying that for the last 12 years in a row, that it's more busy than usual. We have more on our plate than usual. But I think this is just life. This is just
Yeah.
the life of having a family, having a business, working,
Well, I know.
maintaining a home. This is life. It's
I know
adulting.
I know we'll miss it too. Like when it's gone, then it's like it's one of
Yeah,
those things where it's like in the moment you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard, and then when it's over, you're like, oh my gosh, I miss it. And so
yeah,
I just try to be present to that and remember it. And I remember this one quote that someone said one time. It was like there was always a last time for everything.
yeah,
There's like the last time you're going to pick your kid up. Is
yeah.
like you're going to set them down, and that's the last time you're ever going to hold them, and you will never know those moments. So I try to be present
Right,
to all of those.
right.
Like Will, he's 10, and I remember like it was like 6 months ago. He was having a hard time. I can't remember specifically what it was about, and I asked him if do you want me to hold you, pick you up and hold? And he's like, yeah. So I picked him up and held him like a 10-year-old. And I remember thinking this could literally be the last time that you sit there and hold your
Yeah,
10-year-old. So enjoy that moment. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, you take the picture and it's like in your head forever. So I remember where I was, I remember all of that stuff. And I remember putting him down and going, that could be the last time. But, I try to be present to all those moments during and reframe a lot of those thoughts. I'm like, fuck this is hard, I'm like,
yeah,
no, it is hard, but it doesn't mean it can't be enjoyable.
right.
So I try to be present to a lot of those sorts of thoughts and emotions as well.
Yeah, I totally get that. I was my daughter when she's 11.
Hmm.
She's about to turn 11 in like a couple weeks, and she comes into my bed in the middle of the night
Yeah.
and she sleeps on top of me, which means I don't sleep.
Yeah.
And she also is one of those kids who sleeps like, like a helicopter
Yeah.
propeller. She goes around the whole bed. And it's a big bed, but she's on top of me literally. And that means like that's it, my night is over.
Yeah.
And I also had to reframe that for myself of like, oh my God, my night is over and I hate this and it's annoying and why can't she just stay in her bed, to this is the best moment of my life.
Yeah.
Right here, right now is the best moment of my life where
Yeah.
she's coming of, she's coming to me. She could have stayed alone in bed. She could have gone. She could have, I don't know, looked for my husband, but he's at work. But she could have looked for him. She doesn't.
Right.
She comes to me. Um, so yeah, it's really challenging in the moments when it's hard
Yeah.
to embrace it and realize, there's huge gifts even in this hard.
Yeah. I can relate to that. We have both girls in our bed every night now for whatever reason. It just started a while ago. Our 4-year-old's been coming into our bed for a while. Same thing, sleeps like a helicopter
Yeah,
propeller, or just sleeps sideways. Like, so
yeah,
we make an H in bed, like Jacqueline and I, and then Maddie in the middle. And it's hard. Like last night, I probably had 6 inches of our king size bed where I had to sleep sideways to try to get any sleep.
yeah.
But yeah, same sort of thoughts and reframes and all that stuff. It was actually Jacqueline's dad. He said something to me one time. He was just like, it won't last forever. You might as well enjoy it. And I was like, oh yeah, it won't last forever. And I will miss this. And I was like, all right, I am going to enjoy it. But it's hard sometimes. It's hard when you're like freaking tired and you got to get up early and you're like, oh my God.
It
But
is.
I get it.
So kind of in the same way that you reframe these times when you're challenged as a parent, I'm sure you've had to reframe that for yourself in business. Times
Yeah.
that were really hard in business, and maybe even your definition of hard or good and bad or success and failure. Maybe that's also been something to reframe. So I'm curious about that. Have you kind of consciously thought through those things, or have you seen an evolution in how you look at success and failure, and what is success and failure, and what is good and bad in your business?
Yeah. I mean, everything, like you said, it's all in evolution. So the way I think about stuff now is not how I would think about it back then. So I think, for the first, each phase was a different type of hard. So it was like the phase where we're living with my in-laws and nothing was working. And like, then things slowly started to work, but it wasn't like we're really making any money. And it was like all these things. I just viewed it as hard. That's all I did. I didn't understand what a reframe was or to appreciate it or any of that sort of thing. So I just suffered through it, and that's just what I did for the first couple of years. And it was not even that. It was also just like a lot of things I don't have now that I did back then, like the insecurities, seeing my
Yeah,
friends go and have these jobs and buy homes. And then like, I couldn't even rent a house, you know. It wasn't like I was renting a house and all my friends were buying homes, and I was just like, oh, we can't buy a house. We're just renters. I wasn't even able to rent. I was living with my in-laws, you know. Um, and luckily they didn't even ask us for anything. Like we couldn't even really contribute. We just contributed to like some of the utilities, but we didn't pay rent or any of that stuff. And so I had to deal with a lot of that. Then the next wave of it was like, okay, things are starting to kick off a little bit. We're making $200,000 a year in revenue, not profit. And we have our own place. Jacqueline's, not working. We didn't realize that at the time, but had a lot of postpartum depression and all this stuff going on. And then I was like starting my personal development journey, and like, so I was like so happy and like, oh, things are so positive and blah, blah, blah. And then I come home and she was like, just on a different level because she had both babies and just postpartum depression. We didn't realize what was going on. And then like business was sort of not doing all that well. Like it was, but it wasn't that profitable. And I didn't really like what I was doing. And it really fucking sucked. Like it was really freaking hard. And we did like, I think when we moved into that house, it was like, we were at $200,000 a year, I think, when we moved. And then we had built it about $500,000 a year by the time like things finally started to really click. But even then it wasn't a lot of profit. It was like, we're still just breaking even and paying the bills. There was like almost nothing in savings. And so that was just hard. It was, again, I didn't understand reframing and understanding the value. And then we were $40,000 in debt. And I was just like, it was just really hard. So it was like 5 or 6 years probably of just really, really hard, maybe even more. It's probably closer to 6, maybe more years of just a lot of suffering and hardships. But at the same time, you always get these little wins. So it just keeps you going, you know? I definitely didn't have the $1 million overnight sort of story. It was just everything I have was built off of like really hard work and hard emotions and risks and a lot of that stuff. But then when Taylor entered my life, and then we kind of uncovered the video Forex effect, and then Matt came in, and then actually Brittany came in right around the same time too. Everything started to just like work and take off. And we went from 0 to $1 million in 9 months. And that was the period everything shifted for me, because I started to realize, oh man, we went from 0 to 9 for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I finally was like in my dharma, in my purpose. This is like the first trajectory of like the true, this is where your zone of genius is. But the second thing that was happening was all the lessons that I had learned from all the suffering that I had gained over the last 6 years is also what allowed me to go from 0 to 9 or 0 to $1 million in 9 months. Had I not learned those lessons, had I not had that experience, had I not had that pain, had I not had that suffering, there's no way in hell we would have gone from 0 to $1 million in 9 months. We did that because I knew how to launch. We did that because I learned messaging. We had done that because I understand how to fulfill on a program. I understood an email list, and I had to teach the team all this stuff. Had I not known those things, I also knew how to run ads and how to get ads to convert. Had I not learned any of that through all the shit I had to go through, that wouldn't have happened. And that was the moment I'm like, wow, all of that. And even going back before I even started the business, it was like, there's still pain and suffering there, because it was like your dad's company that you put all your eggs in that one basket went under. You don't have a college degree. You don't know what the hell you're doing. You can't sell. You're walking door to door trying to sell anything you can. So it was like even another 3 or 4 years before I even started the business. It was like a 10-year path of just like eating shit basically. And then it all came together in that period. And then that's when I started to learn, okay, all these pains and things you're going through eventually lead to something good. And I love I know I've talked about it on the podcast in the past, where it's like, when you're going through pain and hardship, you asked for this. You really did. And a lot of people don't see that. Right. And it's like, if you ask the universe or God or whatever you believe, like, I want the $1 million business, they go, great. You can have whatever you want. That's fine. But you're not at the level. You're not the person. You haven't learned the lessons. You don't have the skills or the ways of thinking yet to have the $1 million business. So I want to put all these challenges on your plate for you to go through so that you can grow and learn and become the person who can, and has the thinking, who has the skills to be able to do that. And that's how I look at things now. So when we went through that really hard time with, Taylor leaving, the business model changing, or not a great launch, all of this stuff, there was a moment of like freak out, but there was also a moment of like, just enjoy it because this is going to lead to something so much better. And you got to learn these skills, and you want to get to that $5-10 million range. Here you go. Here's the skills you got to learn. So, that's my long-winded answer to your very
Well,
short.
honestly, I have like 15 follow-up questions, but where I want to start with is, there are two, I mean, I've heard of, and I know you've talked about this on the podcast many times, different tough periods that you've gone through. One of them being $40,000 in debt, living in your in-laws' basement. Your wife's about to have a baby. There's like a gun to your head. Figure it out, or you got to go get a job. That's one period. And that was a long period. You did figure it out, but it took a long time. And then there was another more recent period where I saw you firsthand going through that, which is when we had our worst launch. We had to, Taylor was already gone. We had our worst launch. The business model was, in a pivot, but we hadn't made the pivot yet.
Right.
And I watched you go through that period, and I watched you not enjoy it. I watched you feel the fear or the nerves or the anxiety that comes with going through a difficult time. And I also watched you let go of it. And I'm curious, number one, did you do that in the past, or were you able to do that because you had already learned the lessons? And number two, did you have an inkling during any of the really hard times you've gone through in the business? Did you have that voice inside that told you you can do it, or you've done it and you can do it again? Like what is the thing that helps you get through that time to a point where you can say, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to face my fear. I'm going to let go of the expectation. I'm going to jump off the cliff.
What was the first part of the question?
So like, I wasn't there when you were 40K in debt. Right. So I didn't watch you go through that. But when I watched you go through, the quote unquote failed launch and what came out of it and how you rose above it, and also had to lead an entire team with you, different from when you were 40K in debt. It was just you.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like, what gets you out of that?
First, it was just like a lot of personal development work leading up to that point, and just truly understanding that like, this is just a temporary thing was number one. Number two is you have to control your emotional mind, I think, and you have to control your thinking, because if you don't, your subconscious is going to want to keep you safe and protect yourself. And then when things are not going in a way where you feel safe, then it's just going to run wild. And then what's going to happen is you're just going to be in a very terrible emotional state. And if you don't control that, it's going to run down all these rabbit holes, all these negative possibilities, all these things. And now you're operating from like worst case scenario. So there was a period of like, shit, business is going down. How am I going to look in front of other people? Like, how am I going to explain this to my friends who are all really successful? And it was always just this judgment stuff. And I was like, wait, what is going on right now? And then what I had to do, and then it was like, we're going to run out of money and all of this stuff. And it was like, dude, you have more money right now than you've ever had in your entire life. This is where I had to go. And I said, when we get to the next launch, which is in 6 months, we'll do fine. We're changing the messaging. We're working on things. It's sort of working. And we started to see some progress as well in the evergreen process and things like that. It was also really scary because I invested about $40,000 that I didn't really want to spend in coaches and mentors as well at the same time. So it was like, worst launch. We lost money on the upfront. Like, we spent 150 ads, but we didn't collect 150 back. It was like all payment plans and stuff like that. Then I spent another 40,000 on coaches and mentors to help me through it, which I didn't want to spend. And then I stopped giving myself a paycheck at the same time. So it was like, just to make sure that, the employees can be paid and things were safe. But, so it was a little bit scary, but what I had to do was just go like, okay, in 6 months, we're going to have another launch. We're going to make money in between. We have the event with upsells coming up. We have all these things coming up. But I said, if it comes down to it, if you liquidate everything that you have, besides like the equity you have in your house, did you have enough money to keep the company going for like a year without anything coming in? And so it's like, what are you worried about? And I was like, and then now it's more of the logical mind. It was more of the logical shutting down this subconscious emotional runaway train. And I started to operate from there. But there was one moment, because it's hard, because I don't want to I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to about it. I don't want to talk to the team about it. I'm not going to go talk to the team about like, hey, here's the state, or here's my concerns and worries, and put that on them, but there was a moment where in that December, we had only done like $60,000 in revenue for the month of December. Last year is like 65,000 or something like that, but which is a decent amount of money. But for us, that doesn't cover the bills for us, because there's a lot of expenses inside this company. And I remember Matt saying something, and I remember feeling the stress, and I don't even remember what he said, but he said something, and it wasn't anything bad. It was more of like, the marketing strategy or this or that. And I remember I had an emotional outburst on him, and I snapped on him. And then I remember finishing that going like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And he started apologizing. I'm so sorry. He's like, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did. Like, blah, blah, blah. And I had to like tell him, and I've done this to Matt twice that I can remember. And I remember sitting there going like, how can I, like, Matt has been like the number one dedicated person who's always had my back and said, why are you doing that to him? And it was like, well, cause I didn't have anyone to release this stuff to. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I just had an automated reaction, boom. And unfortunately, Matt was at the tail end of that. And I had to like call him and apologize and just be like, dude, I'm sorry. I'm just under a lot of pressure and da, 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 da. But that was also another moment of like me recognizing you need to get your shit together. Like you can't keep, like, you're going to be fine. You have to go back to that mechanism of like, this is what you have in the bank. The bank account actually hasn't even dropped at all. You're just breaking even. And there's nothing wrong with that. You haven't lost any money over the last couple of months. You guys are doing great, and you have a launch coming up in 3 months. And then lo and behold, it was like our best launch we've ever done. And I remember finishing that launch going like, we're back, baby, we're back. And it was like an awesome moment. But then when I started to recognize how I was treating, someone like Matt, I didn't like that person. And it just made me, again, just reevaluate where I need to be and how I need to operate and hold myself. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does, and I think everybody can resonate with this, even if you're not at multiple six figures, even if $60,000 a month sounds to you like, oh my God, I hope I do that in a year, right? We've all heard numbers like that, where I hope I do those numbers in a year. Why are you complaining about it in a month? And then we become the people who do it in a month, and then we complain about it again. So yeah. No matter where, for the listeners, no matter where you are in your business right now, I think what you speak to is, your humanity, pressure, and money pressures, and, definitions of success, and concerns about what other people will say or think or judge. It's part of being human, right? And it's okay to have those experiences. And even in those moments when you behave in a way that's out of alignment with who you are and who you want to be. Yeah. And that's okay. That happens, and you take accountability for it. And that's a huge value that we hold inside the company. You have integrity and you take accountability, right? And you do better the next time, right? It's not about, it's not like you're never going to be under pressure or under stress. You probably are. There's more times like that ahead. And maybe you're gonna, take it out on someone, inadvertently.
Well, here's the thing too, which is really interesting, because I remember asking the question, why did you do this? Why did you react that way to Matt? And why didn't you do it to like Julie or to Brittany? Yeah. And it's kind of a very interesting answer, because it's the same reason why I believe that kids will snap at their mom and not their dad. And it's because it's the safest person to snap to. Yeah. And it was like, if I responded that way to Brittany, I wouldn't have felt comfortable with that, because I don't have, like, obviously I love Brittany and Julie and they've been here, but Matt and I are also like, we hang out we just spend time together. We go camping together. We do these things. And he's like, one of my really good friends. And it was like safe. It was like safe to be able to do that. So Matt, if you're listening, the reason why is because we're such good friends. Like, yeah, if there's any, sort of that thing, like, obviously I love all the team, but it's like, and that's Jacqueline, unfortunately, like, gets a lot of that from the kids, which is like a lot of like attitude and things like that. She's like, I don't get it. I'm the nicest to them. I'm like, that's why they feel the safest. They won't do that to the teacher. They won't do that to like someone who they do it to you because they're safe with you. And that's why they do it. And it's kind of like, I don't know if it's like a backhanded compliment, but it's also like, well, I'm also the nicest, so I should get the best behavior sort of thought process. But anyways, yeah, that's how I handled it.
What is something that surprised you about who you needed to become in order to have what you have?
That's a good question. I didn't know the entrepreneurial journey was a personal development journey. Um, and I don't think people get that, you know, I don't think they understand that until you're in it. Like
Yeah.
even Jacqueline, I have these conversations with her and she, you know, she's kind of like she understands the concept. She's like, yeah, yeah. Like you have these conversations with her. I'll have these. She's like, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I'm like, you don't get it because,
Right.
and
Because you
she
haven't
can't
lived
because
it.
she hasn't done it. She hasn't run. She's about to start her own business, but she hasn't run her own business and gone through these sorts of challenges that requires you to be something better. So that was like number one.
Yeah.
But following that same vein was I just didn't understand like being a leader and how important that is. Um, and just being strong. Like I just, you know, me and my friends just call it like spiritual warrior, like being that spiritual warrior where it's like, I think people have this misconception that we have to be like tough,
Yeah.
like tough mean. And it's like, you don't have to be tough mean. It's tough compassion. I mean, like getting at being able to like process, but get out of emotions, not letting certain things bug you, not letting the comments and the fears worry, like just getting rid of judgment. I think that's been the biggest thing, honestly, is just getting rid of what other people think. Like, I just don't care anymore.
Mm.
And I don't like the things that used to like emotionally send me down a rabbit hole. They don't even affect me anymore, you know? And I hear comments from people that are like, well, you know, I don't know why that doesn't bother you. You're just like, you can't get in, you just can't tap into your emotions. You just
Right.
aren't,
Mm.
you just don't show any emotion. And
Yeah.
it was like, I'm a very emotional person. I
Yeah.
cry. I almost cried on this podcast already talking about Matt, you know, like I'm a very emotional person,
Yes.
but just because I don't show an emotion to the same situation as you doesn't mean I'm repressing emotions, or doesn't mean that I'm not holding back emotions. It means that it literally doesn't fucking bother me.
Right.
Like it's just, you know, Don Javier told us one time about, he talks about water a lot, and he's like, you guys should be blessing the water. And, you know, he's like, it changes the chemistry of the water and the energy of the water when you bless it and it comes in, and we're like 70% water. This is a practice or whatever.
Mm.
And he said, so just be aware of that, you know, just be aware of blessing the water. And he said, so what will happen is you're going to be consistent with it. And then he said, but over time, you won't need to do it anymore because that's just will become who you are. And I didn't
Mm.
really understand it till I saw this image that I'm pulling up here. And it goes in this order. First, there's an intention. Then the intention becomes a behavior. Then the behavior becomes a habit.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a practice. Then it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Then it's simply who you are.
Right.
And that's what I've realized is like when you start to practice getting rid of a judgment or not letting these things bother you, it's just an attention in the beginning. Then it becomes your behavior. Then it becomes a habit overall. And then
Yes.
it becomes a practice of like not getting into it. And then it becomes second nature. And then the next step is just who you are. You're just someone who doesn't get bothered by those things anymore.
Right.
And
Right.
and that's something that kind of surprised me, is it would literally change who I am and what affects me and what doesn't. And again, I'm very good at like processing emotion and feeling emotions and crying when I need to cry, and not hiding
Yeah.
it, not getting embarrassed by it. But there's also a lot of stuff that used to really bother me, but doesn't, because it's just not who I am anymore. And I would
Yes, because
say,
you've evolved.
yeah.
It's
So I
your
would say
evolution.
that's
Yeah.
the sort of thing that surprised me. And also, um, how spiritual I got kind of surprised me too, because I was not that way. But
Mm.
for me, the spiritual journey, because a lot of the sort of, I guess, teachings or philosophies, especially from Don Javier and a lot of the books that I read from Don Juan and stuff, it's all Toltec wisdom. And Toltec
Yeah.
wisdom is all about this stuff. It's about how to operate strongly in your personal power, remembering who you are, not being controlled by anyone else, let them into your thinking. Like, that's what it is. And, you know, it's a lot of Toltec wisdom, which I didn't expect that either. But again, I wouldn't have it any other way.
So how would, you know, I'm curious about this aspect of you being surprised by your own attraction to kind of the spiritual world and wisdom, saying I wasn't that way. Like how were you?
Very 3D. Um, I started the business because I wanted to, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with being in the 3D. Just want to say that because I don't want this to come off as judgment,
Yeah,
because trust me, I love the 3D.
I
Like
know.
I want a nice house.
Yeah,
I want nice cars. I had a Jaguar, a $100,000 sports car at one point.
yeah,
I want millions of dollars in the bank. I want all of those things, and that's fine. The problem is, the difference is I'm just not attached by it. I'm not driven
yeah,
by it.
yeah.
Like if I don't have it, then I'm totally fine. If I lose it, I'm totally fine. And that, by the way, that's also another place I had to get to when business was hard, is like, yeah, I'm fine if I lose it all. That's fine. Like I'm
Right,
good. I'm fine.
right.
And that's also what allowed me to operate at the level I needed to operate at,
Yeah,
because I really do believe that anytime you have an emotional pain or suffering, it's because of some sort of attachment. And so
100%.
you can lose that attachment, then it sets you free
Right,
emotionally.
right.
Forgot where I was going with this. What was the question again?
I was asking about how you were before you started as
Oh,
an entrepreneur, and you were very in the 3D.
very in 3D. So that's what drove me becoming a millionaire, like
Yeah,
having like a Ferrari and all those things, which also is what kind of led me down the path of not being in my dharma, because it was like, what's just going to make me money? And
yeah.
again, these are all lessons I had to learn, that sort of stuff. But that's kind of how I was. And I was also very insecure. I was very controlled. I didn't realize a lot of my actions were controlled by what other people thought. A lot of my conversations were controlled by what other people thought.
Mhm.
I would control conversations to make myself be perceived a certain way,
Yeah,
especially when I was very insecure.
yeah,
So like when people would ask me about business, it was always like, oh, business is great. We're doing X, Y, and Z. It was like, we made $5,000 this week. And it was like, I wouldn't say, yeah, but the 3 weeks before that, I made nothing,
right,
and that's not even enough to pay the bills. And so it was
right.
always stuff like that, I was just young. But I would say that's how I was before. And I got to hand it, James is the one who kind of got me onto the personal development journey, which started with land. I was always into like psychics for past life regressions and all that. I love living like
Yes.
psychic. I was into that stuff just because I was fascinated by it, the metaphysical, but I was never into like spiritual development, personal development. And then James got me to go to Landmark, and that kind of sent me on this path of just like, because I remember leaving Landmark going like, I feel like the most powerful person in the world. I feel like a weight has been off my shoulders. I was like, oh my God, it was huge. It was huge for me. And then I was like, I need more of this. Like, I need more of this feeling. I feel this. And then it also gave me so much more compassion. I remember,
Yeah.
they do this exercise where you have to like pretend the person into your right and left are just like screaming things at you and you're the worst people in the world and yada, yada, yada. And then it gets to a point where you realize, oh my God, I'm the person to the left
Mm,
and I'm the person to the right of these people.
yes.
And then you realize everyone's just as afraid as you of this world as you are. And I never realized that before. And I remember during our lunch break, walking through the mall, just staring at people, thinking like how scared they are, how much pain they have to go through, just like I do. And just being filled with so much compassion. And I was like, oh my God, I have so much compassion for every single person on this planet. And I'm like, this is who I want to be. That's the person I'm going to strive to be over the course of my life.
Right. And I would argue you always were. It's just that those parts were not given front and center stage as they are now.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I'd agree with that for sure.
And
Yeah.
it's less to me the way when I look from the side view of watching you evolve over the last, call it 4 years that we've known each other. I feel like you just become more and more of who you've always been.
Right. Yeah. Remembering who you are.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, I know we inside of our programs and outside of our programs, we talk about remembering who you are. We talk about sitting in the silence in order to hear
Mm-hmm.
who it is you are, to remember who you are, to listen to your inner wisdom, your intuition. When it comes to that, have you had the experience of hearing answers come from within you?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's seeing signs that are pointing you to a direction that you should go. And have you had the experience of knowing that and at the same time resisting it and hesitating to act on it? And if so, what held you back and what helps you
Yeah.
move forward?
I mean, I could talk about this all day long because there's so many. Um, yeah. So intuition, sitting in the silence, all those sorts of things have been the most vital tools that I've ever used inside this company. Um, the whole direction with messaging, the name NGM, all of this stuff has come from sitting in the silence. My best content I've ever created has come from sitting in the silence. Um, I don't know if I'm just debating if I want to go here or not. I guess I will. I think it's okay to go here. But before Taylor quit, I knew our time was limited. It's just a gut feeling. I didn't have a logical reason for it. But around that in January, February, I'm like, it's whatever sort of synergy we had, something has changed, something has shifted. And I don't know if it was just like, um, I don't know if we had grown apart or if it was more of like whatever roles we were to play in each other's lives in this context is near the end. And I could sense that, feel it. But I kind of knew. So when she, eventually was like, I got another job opportunity. I have to take it. I'm like, I wasn't surprised. I was emotional about it because I cared for her. She's like a sister to me. And we've done a lot of great things together. So I had an emotional attachment to her because it was like my buddy, it was like my right hand woman in the business. And we went through a lot of pain together. We went through a lot of growth together. We figured a lot of things out together. So there was that emotional sort of attachment when she left, but I kind of knew that it was coming sooner rather than later, but I didn't want to face it because honestly, my life, if I had to pick a period of time that it was the best, it was like the year or two before Taylor quit. It was like, we were doing $2 million, $2.5 million a year. I was working maybe 10 hours a week. Launches were great. Everything was great. Like family was great. We moved into our first house and it was just like awesome. We had amazing friends and then everything got stripped away, like all within like a 6-month period. But I knew that and I didn't do anything about it. I didn't have conversations with her about it. Because I didn't want to like really have to go through it,
Yeah.
So that was one of them. And then obviously the next one was like having you as come in as COO and kind of take over that role. And that actually happened during a meditation, pretty much almost, now that I think about it, a year after I had the first feeling of Taylor leaving. A year after that moment in like January, February, I just was like sitting there thinking like the business needs someone. It's getting to the point where we need someone in charge of operations and all that stuff. And I remember going into a meditation that I normally do a couple times a week. And then I just had a vision of you being COO. And I'm like, that makes no sense. I don't understand. Like she has her own business. She's doing well with it. She's good at it. I feel like that's her dharma, although it's not up for me to decide, but that's just kind of what I felt. And then I didn't say anything for like a couple months. And then it was like, things got worse. And I was like, you need another person. And then I remember like just kind of nonchalantly dropping it to you. And you're like, nope, that's not my dharma, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Like I wasn't surprised or anything. And then a month later, you're like, maybe we should revisit that. And then like a couple months after that, here you are like running the company and it just like worked out. So that's another great example. But I would say the most pivotal ones are anytime I needed a pivot. So like when I was the $40,000 in debt, I'm like, I know I don't want to do that anymore. I had a business partner that we were working really well. We did really well together. And then that ended. And I was like, I don't, and it was a lot underneath that person's brand. It wasn't underneath my own brand. And I wasn't standing up on my own 2 feet of what I wanted to do. And I spent 3 months, got $40,000 in debt, just sitting in silence until one day it just hit me, bam, video Forex effect. And that led to where we are today. So I would say those are probably like the 3 that come to mind like right away.
I love that. I mean, I don't know how people experience this, but for me, I resonate with that a lot because I've had a lot of resistance to intuition calling me to do something or to take action in a certain direction, including what you just mentioned of you and me kind of joining forces. I felt that from the moment I met you, and I resisted it for years.
Yeah.
for years. And that is why when you first kind of casually dropped it, my knee-jerk reaction was to shut it down and say, no freaking way. No, thank
Right.
you. I'm like right on this like upward trajectory, best time in my business. Now, forget it.
Right.
And
Yep.
then I also had to look at that and say, okay, why did I have such resistance? What was that resistance about? Was it because I actually really wanted that?
It's because you're afraid of greatness, Rachel. Because that's what we're giving you here. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, the truth is because I was afraid.
Yeah.
I was afraid. I was afraid that it wouldn't work out.
Yeah. And it might not, but it
Right.
also could, you know.
Right. And I have to, and this is what we are all called to do, right? To feel the fear, name it, feel it, and release attachment to it. It might not work out, and that's okay. I'm still going to
Yeah.
be okay. And so are
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. 100%.
So I want to kind of transition a little bit to talking about the team. When it comes to transferring your vision to the team, to elevate each one of our team members and amplifying their roles to kind of, you know, spread your message and your work. What do you feel has helped you create a very united team that is able to do that, that is able to carry out your vision?
You know, that's a tough question because I don't know if I've really like mastered this, to be honest with you. And I think part of the reason is I'm in this period where I like messaging and I like communication and I like where we're going with the company, but I also, this goes back to my intuition, feels like this isn't it. You know, there's like, you do well with it, but when you want to get to like the big leagues, there's something else beyond this for you. And I don't know what that is. I can't see it. So it's hard to really say, like, even bring down to the team, like, here's what my vision is. Like when I started talking about messaging, it was very clear. I'm like, I want to teach people to remember who they are. And I want to teach them to like speak their message and find their purpose and like how to put out in the content and how to communicate that. And then now I know there's something else. And it's like, you know, for examples, like Jesse and I had a call, you know, last week to talk about content. And she's like, I just want to know, like, what is your vision? What sort of content? Like, what do you, and I literally told him, like, honestly, Jesse, I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know what it is. I don't know what I like. I kind of know what I don't like, but I don't really know what I want, you know, and, which is like an impossible task to give her now to help create content and social media stuff. But you know, it is what it is and we'll figure it out. But I mean, if I had to answer the question, I would say you have to get very clear on what it is that you want, how you want to impact people. You have to figure out the deeper purpose, which is not your results. So a lot of people will say, I'm a copywriter, so my purpose and my why is to help people write better copy. And it's like, no, that's a result that you give people. But when 10,000 people who have a purpose are writing better copy, what effect is created in the world? And that's the vision. So for me, it was always like creating a better world for our kids, like getting rid of industry norms that are causing suffering and create an opportunity or an environment or a world where they can be anything they want without people telling them it's stupid because it's just the norm now.
Right.
That's why it's called new generation entrepreneurs, because I do believe that entrepreneurship will be the future of the company or of the world. It's not going to be jobs. It's not, I don't think college is going to be the same thing either, because it's an outdated concept also, unless you're going into a field that needs it, like lawyers or architects or engineers, but like art history, because that's what I was an art history major. Like
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I went to college basically to run. I had a full ride to run. Yeah. And they're like, you got to pick something. I'm like, art history sounds easy. Or actually, no, sorry, it was studio art. But I had to take a bunch of art history majors and also a bunch of women's studies classes. I'm like 1 or 2 classes away from having a minor in women's studies because of all the classes I had to take for that. But yeah, I think that's the only way I really know how to answer the question, is getting clear on it first and then just communicating it to the team, but then having your own boundaries around that. So it's like, who controls the message? Like, do you have someone who controls the copy? Do you have someone who writes, you and I talked about a boundary last week. I'm like, I don't want someone creating any content other than me going out on our social, because it's not me. It's not my energy. It's not whatever. And then maintaining those boundaries as well. but they have to have the vision. You have to have know the boundaries on the vision of what they can and can't do, what needs to be on your shoulders, that sort of thing. And that's just kind of how I've managed it over the years.
You know, when you were talking about this kind of next phase or next evolution that you can't quite see, it reminded me a lot of times I've had during my career as a divorce attorney, I would talk to people who sometimes would say, I don't know if I should get a divorce or not. It was kind of a like, should I stay or should I go situation?
Right.
And I would always tell them, you know, and this is what I want to tell you. It's okay to be in that limbo. Just be in the limbo. You don't, you know, when it is time, when you are ready, the answer reveals itself to you to the point where it's not a decision. Yeah. Which direction? What is the thing? What am I not seeing? Like we make it into some big thing, big revelation that needs to come. And most of the time, at least for me in my experience of these moments in my life where I felt like something's off or something's missing and I don't quite know what it is, the more I've allowed myself to just be in that place of not knowing, the more I realized one day, oh, I already made the decision. I already jumped off the cliff. I didn't even notice, but I already made the decision. It's already done. And it's much smaller than I imagined it to be, like thinking that it was going to be some giant revelation one day.
Right. I think it can come through as a giant revelation though. Like when I uncovered the video 4X, it was like, ba-boom. Oh my God, you know? What was really interesting while you were talking, I just got really clear on what it might be. So that was really good.
So are you going to share it with us or no?
I think it goes back to the root of what I was just talking about, new generation entrepreneur, creating something that is teaching people that you don't have to follow the norm of what you've been told success is. We're going to create a new way of doing it. Which goes back to originally what it was. And I feel like I've kind of lost it over the years, but when I started the Video 4X, this is what it was, getting back to the root of that. And then as we talked internally with the team, you, me and Matt, we started to discuss the idea of starting to tackle strategy, which I've always wanted to avoid. So everyone always teaches strategy and then it falls flat because no one knows messaging, but in my opinion, no one knows messaging as well as we do and how to integrate it into strategy. So then when we start including all strategy, email templates, all of this stuff, business models, talking offers combined with the best messaging process out there, it's a no-brainer. And then that becomes the school that the only thing you're going to need to become a new generation entrepreneur. So it's kind of getting back to the roots, but evolving into strategy, I think, and then having this sort of message of like, don't go to college if you don't want to. You want to do something else and you want to do something purpose-driven. We got you. We got everything covered, which we've never had before. We've never had any of that before. And that fires me up. I get really excited about that. So that's kind of the gist of it right now.
Well, first of all, I think the feeling of being fired up is a telltale sign that we should all pay attention to.
Yeah.
Also, you heard it here first, folks, just saying. And two, and the third thing, when you said the word school, that hit me. Like it was a resounding kind of like, that's it. So I don't know what that means exactly, but I just thought I would share it with you before I forget.
So sick of the traditional school system. I'm so effing tired of it. Yeah. You know, and like our kids are in a public school, but it's not the normal traditional, like it's not the same type of thing I grew up in and all of this stuff. But even how they do things I'm like not totally on board with. So I definitely, you know, and I told Jacqueline, like, why don't we just start on school? I'm like, it sounds like such a big project, but
it is.
But I don't know, maybe that's what it is at some point. Maybe that's what it evolved to or whatever, you know. It's really interesting is we put our kids in a Montessori school. And we really liked it. Like it was great for Lily, but it wasn't great for Will. Like, cause it's very much like get your own stuff done. Like it's kind of like, here's your projects for the week, figure out how to do it. You know, obviously it's more detailed than that. That's just a very blanket sort of.
It's self-led.
Yeah. That's a much better way to say it. But Will loved structure. And then he would do everything in the first day. And then he would have 4 days of the week. And he'd be like, I'm so bored at school. And blah, blah, blah. So it just wasn't great. And then the community there at the specific school we were at just didn't, fit well with Jacqueline and I and a lot of that stuff. So we ended up switching. But I still love the school system. But anyways, the reason why I bring this up is because there's a lot of Montessori schools here in Flagstaff. And every time I drive past one, I'm like, this was just created by someone at some point.
Yeah.
Like I forgot her name, but her last name is Montessori. And I'm like,
Yep.
this was just created by someone at some point. And now it's like, there's like 10 schools just in this city following that. And I don't think enough people recognize that. It's like everything that you think is normal or the standard or an option was literally created by someone at some point. And why can't you guys do that? And I think there's a lot of the problems with messaging that people have in content is they just like regurgitate something else someone else created. And it's like have some mastery over your craft, have some like focus and dedication on it and create new shit that's better. And people are like, how did you grow so fast? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, because everything that I created with messaging, I fucking created. I figured it out myself. It is my frameworks. They're I'm not regurgitating anything from NLP. I haven't taken a single NLP class, although people have told me there's a lot of overlap. But I'm like, I'm creating my own thing, man. It's like, just stop regurgitating the same shit as everyone else and create something better. And then those are always the people that go to the top, but it takes mastery. It takes time. It takes dedication. It takes working with people. It takes like a passion to try to figure it out. It takes, also educating yourself, because you still at least want to know the standards and the basics, which by the way, this like thing I have about not taking NLP class is eventually like breaking down. I'm like, maybe I should take it just to have like a better foundation of what I'm talking about. I can build off of it. But now I'm kind of going off on a rant, but it was like, this is one of the things I don't think a lot of people recognize is like everything that you think is normal as a standard was created by someone at some point, and you can recreate that. And when you do, that's when you start having quantum leaps. Like even the Culvers, I look at the Culvers and what they're creating. They're creating their own stuff, their own process, and they had quantum leaps last year, and I just think it's really important to do that. And I would love to do that on a bigger scale for sure, like really big scale.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all in on that. Maybe in 100 years, people will be sending their kids to a Lucero school.
I don't think I would call it a Lucero school, but yeah, like I would call it, I don't know what I would call it, but it feels weird having something named after like me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want the recognition. I just want I want something better. I want to like have a hand in that,
Yeah, totally. So, but you said something that I want to pause on for a sec, because you're right. It does, in order for us to create something and we are all content creators, to be in that space of creation and creativity, it requires a certain amount of inspiration too. And I'm curious for you, that process of, or do you have those times where you're just in like a creative block, if you will, or just like you're not inspired really?
Yeah.
And if so, what do? You wait for it to go away, or what do you do?
I don't know. I feel like I'm in that right now. To be honest, this podcast is the most inspired I've been to like go back to work in a really long time, because it's been such a hard emotional process over the last couple of years with everything we had going on. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's great not to force something. I think sitting in silence helps. I think getting out in nature, which is like today I was building the Gaga ball pit for my kids' school. We bought one for their school, and then everyone set it up. So I had to go set it up. And I was just sitting there outside, and I took my shoes off, feet on the grass. And it was nice and chilly. It was like 65 degrees, perfect temperature. Sun was out, and had my coffee, and I'm surrounded by forest because their school's in the middle of the forest. And I'm just like, this is really nice. And I remember thinking, you haven't taken time to just like sit outside and be still in a really long time. And this is really enjoyable right now. And I remember thinking, I wish I could just have a desk right here. I wish I could have a desk right now and just write. And I remember thinking like, can I just buy a plot? Like there's just a small piece of land here in Flagstaff in the middle of fucking nowhere. And like, just get a shed and put some insulation and drywall in it, and like maybe a window and whatever. And just like have that as my place to work, because just sitting in my house every single day it doesn't feel very inspiring to me anymore. And so I think getting out and finding your place, is a great thing for inspiration, and getting to the root of like your dharma, your purpose, your deeper purpose is always good.
100%. We are such sentient beings is that the right word? Sentient beings,
Mm,
that we are so affected by our environment. And I
yeah.
noticed this about myself too. We have as you know, we have a house in Tahoe, and I call it my happy place because there's something about that house is also kind of like, it's in the woods, and you go out on the deck and you're at ground level with these, like, 80-foot trees
Hmm.
everywhere. And there's something about being there and being in the woods and being surrounded by all the trees as far as the eye can see. There's something about that I find very, not just inspirational, but also really grounding.
Groundings. Yep.
And that is where I get my best work done. And
Yeah.
I just went for a few days with Scott. And honestly, it was a working vacation. Like, he worked, he's rebuilding our lower deck, which he finished.
Hmm.
And I worked. It was just I had my meetings, I had a regular work day, but I also wrote. And it was the
Mm.
first time I sat down to write in a long time. And I just banged out like 20,000 words.
Wow. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And it felt like zero effort. It
Yeah.
just came out of me. And I know that it's something about that place, being in that place, that just turns it on for me. So I
Right.
think, to your point, yeah, you can get a little cabin in the woods and just go create.
Just go do it. Yeah. And then even like last year, I didn't end up doing it, but I wanted to. And even text James. I was like, "Dude, you want to do this with me?" Because he lives like 30
Mhm.
minutes, 40 minutes from me. And I was just gonna like load up the truck and just throw like our jackeries in there, a table. And there's so many trails here that you're allowed to just go off in the middle of nowhere and then just drive in the middle of the forest, set my table down, like bring some
Yep.
snacks, maybe a little barbecue, and just spend all day there working. Then you have
Yep.
Starlink, so you can just like work or whatever. And there's even times where I've taken the trailer out just to go camping by myself to just write and things like that. But the key word I think for me is just like grounding, find that spot where you're grounded. That's also why I took my socks and shoes off, because I wanted to like be
Yeah.
grounded while I
Yeah.
was doing this.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I can definitely relate to all that for sure.
This morning we have a sales team meeting every single morning. Matt and I and our
Hmm.
sales team are on it. And Matt this morning showed up in his trailer in the middle of nowhere with his dogs. Everybody on the call was like, "Where are you? We're so jealous." That's exactly what he was doing, exactly what you described. He just
Yeah.
took himself and his trailer and his dogs, set up in the middle of nothing, and worked.
And I love that. I love that. I love that our company can do that, like allow for that to happen. And that's what the best thing is for an online business is like, if you're on salary and you work at our company, you have unlimited time off. I really don't care. Just make sure your shit gets done. Make sure your KPIs are being hit. Like, just when you want to take a day off or a week off, whatever, go do it. You guys want to travel and work, go travel and work. You want to camp in the middle of the forest and use Starlink, then go do it. So, and Matt, I love that Matt takes advantage of that. Like, and
Yes.
not takes advantage in a bad way. He's just like,
No,
cool,
no,
this
he
is the
does it.
setup we have. Let's go use it. So I love that. That's awesome. I'm glad he's
I
doing that.
know. I know. Every once in a while he'll do it, and like, I know that he does it, and but it still surprises me because he doesn't necessarily tell me in advance, but
Oh
just
no,
one
yeah.
day he shows up, right? He shows
It's just,
up, and the backdrop is like
yeah,
amazing.
one day he's in his office, the next morning he's like in the middle of the
Literally.
forest in nowhere, like a mountain in Colorado or something.
Exactly. I mean, like, I'm on a meeting with Matt 5 days a week. So like,
Yeah.
I see him every single day, and then one
Yeah.
day he shows up and I'm like, "Dude, like, show me around."
Yeah. That's so cool. I love
It
that.
is. It is. Someone submitted a, a cool question. I thought,
Mhm.
how do you pick your coaches? Like, think back to the first coaches for a moment. How did you pick them? And what do you look for in the coaches,
The
that you let in
process,
now?
this is also a good question for you because you were head coach and still sort of have that role now as we transition. But um, I mean, to be honest, in the beginning, it was like send a survey out to our students, and just whoever wanted to do it could do it. Um, but then now we have sort of a coaching philosophy in certain ways to answer questions, and sort of like, I guess, protocols that they need to follow, and things like that to keep it a little bit more structured. So for me, experience is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And we have different levels of coaches. So there's like the coach in the Facebook group of NGM, which is kind of like, that's where most people will start. You don't start off doing one-on-one calls in NGM Plus. You start off there. Then we move people up depending on how well they show up or how well they do, or how well they understand questions and how well they understand the methodology, and how well do they understand the methodology in someone else's business with the integration. So when you go into the NGM Facebook group and you're a coach, like, we're reading your questions, we're reading your responses. And if I'm like, this person doesn't get it, this person doesn't see how this concept applies to this person's business, like, we just won't move them up. And like, we'll probably end up just releasing them at the end of our agreement, because we do have agreements with the coaches of like a certain amount of time. But obviously I work with them to make them aware and things like that, so that they can improve and have the opportunity, because you can't change anything if you don't have the awareness of it.
Right.
So that's what we do, number one. But number two is like, and I tell the NGM Plus coaches the most, because they're our best coaches. They're the ones that are literally doing one-on-one calls with the students. They're the ones inside the Facebook group. Like, they're also the ones making the most amount of money from us, or with us. So I always tell them, if you want to be a one-on-one coach, then you need the experience of doing this. Meaning, like, if you're not going to use the NGM process or philosophy, then you're not going to be a coach for me. Right. And like, if you're not going to do webinars and follow our process and make it work, then, which is fine. You don't have to use my philosophy. Right. That's totally fine. I'm not like, you have to use it. It's like, no, but if you're going to coach someone on something, then you better freaking know it. You better be making it successful, and knowing it means you're doing it, you're implementing it, you're making it work. We've had coaches in the past who will answer other people's questions in the Facebook group, saying something that's the opposite of what we teach in the philosophy, in our philosophy, which again is fine. You can have different opinions than me, but when you represent my company and you start saying things that are the opposite of what we believe, like, you're not going to be a coach for us for very long, which it doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to be? Why would you want to be a coach for a company that has a certain sort of philosophy, values, and ways of thinking, and you don't operate that way? Like, why would you want to be in that environment? I don't understand it. So we've had things like that when we've had to release coaches because of that, which again is fine. It's not a dictatorship. It's not like you have to believe me but like, you have to know what our stuff is and you have to believe in it. Otherwise there's no point for you to being a coach here. I don't know. Is there anything you want to add to that or think that I missed?
Well, I think first of all, it's the question made me laugh, because I was like, okay, first of all, we've been evolving this process, right? It's not like we had a process to begin with and we had this like really thought out thing. It evolved over time. Yeah. And I think where we are with it now is, for me, for my part, I look for people who have a passion for messaging, who believe that messaging is at the core and at the center and at the heartbeat of being an entrepreneur and having a business. And it is all about communication. So I think for me, it starts there. Then there's also, I look for people who just naturally embody values of our company. Right. People who are very service oriented, people who have integrity, people who take accountability, people who are fail forward, people who, test and then ask, what could I do to make it better? Or rather than kind of get stuck in perfectionism. So when we look at our students, and I would say, I think this is correct. I think it's accurate to say that all of our coaches came as students. Is that right? I think so.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I would ever go outside of that, because it's like, if you're not a student of ours first, like, and you're going to come on as a coach, and you're going to have to like study the program and like then implement it. It just doesn't make any sense to do that.
So when we look at our students as they're going through the program, and we look for these qualities and we look at who stands out, because believe it or not, students do stand out to us. And it doesn't matter if you're in the mentorship or in the NGM group, some people will stand out. And those are the people we watch for a while, we watch how they show up for themselves, for their own businesses. Right. And then, and then we have a discussion in the team, like, what do you think about this person? Should we reach out to them and see if maybe they want to kind of come on as a coach? And then we kind of see how it feels, and if there is a good match. I think for us, the the match, like the integrity piece, the alignment piece is really important.
It is.
And it's true for us in how we bring students in, right? How we bring customers, clients in. And it's also true internally in the team. I think the alignment piece is super important, because the skills of coaching can be taught, skills can be improved. I can't really teach you values.
No.
I feel like that comes with. That's either you have it or you don't have it. And if you don't have it, sooner or later, you're gonna leave or you're gonna be asked to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's a perfect example, because we were just talking about this the other day. I'll give a really good example of someone who has like the values that support the company is Andrea is a perfect example of it.
Yeah.
In the last launch, we tried this whole new sales process of setting calls, getting invites out, people DMing, reaching out, like getting all these calls booked. And we didn't know how it was going to go. And I told the team, like, look, guys, like, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know like what the pricing structure is. Like, this is what I think we're going to do, and we'll see how it works out. But I'm just like asking you to trust me that put in whatever time you can. I'm not asking you to drop your lives and your business for it, but whatever hours you can put in. And just know that if it doesn't work out the way that I think it will, and you put in all these hours and the pricing structure that I'm giving you right now doesn't work out, I got your back. Like, we'll figure something out. We'll pay you guys whatever we need to make it right for everyone. And then Andrea was kind of on the tail end of that, like the wrong end of the stick, because she was put in a lot of hours for something that didn't actually work out. And we didn't know that. That's how business is. You try and test it and whatever. So then I told Julie, I'm like, can you reach out to Andrea and just see like how many hours did she put into it? And we can pay her like an hourly rate and just get her paid and pay her for her time. And then Julie reaches out to Andrea, and Andrea goes, I have no idea how many hours I put in. I'm not going to spend the time to go back and figure that out. She's like, don't even worry about it. I'm just really glad to help the company out and like have one of our best launches ever. That's just like really, really important to me. And I'm just grateful for that. And Julie's like, oh, we don't have to pay Andrea, or she didn't say we don't have to pay Andrea. She's like, Andrea doesn't want to be paid or whatever. And I was like, to me, I'm like, that's the type of mentality and effort and energy we want in the company. So I just told Julie, I'm like, I'll work it out with Andrea. So I just messaged Andrea. I'm like, here, what if we paid you X amount? She's like, that's awesome. I love that. Let's do it. And we just did it. But she didn't expect anything. She's just there to help out. And that's the sort of like energy. But then we have had instances where people just take and take and take and ask and ask and ask. And then when, situations like that with Andrea show up, they're like the last one to volunteer for anything. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to be around people like that. Like, you're done, you're out, you're gone,
Right.
But to go back to the original question, we also look at just like our students and how they show up in the Facebook group. A lot of the coaches we have today were students who were just answering other students' questions, and they were doing a good job with it. And we're like, shit, let's bring them on as a coach, invite them in. And we've had a lot of people ask to be coaches, but we always go to that first, like who's already coaching without being asked to be a coach and is doing a good job with it, So I would say that's kind of what we look for.
And I also think like at this point, certainly inside the NGM Plus group of coaches, there's there's probably 4 or 5 coaches who have been coaches for you for several years.
Oh yeah.
And really they know the program inside out. They know they know the evolution of NGM from Video 4X into NGM, and as NGM Plus also became, our flagship program. Like, they really have a very deep understanding of messaging, of your philosophy, and so I feel like they do such a good job representing who you are, representing our philosophy, coaching students and leading students. So, I think, and the fact that this core group of coaches has been with you for so long, I think speaks volumes about you, Brandon, and how you show up. And, what you just said about Andrea, you're 100% right. I watched that happen in the launch too. She jumped in. She actually jumped in without even being asked to do it. Yeah. She jumped in, and kind of you and I have always traditionally been very active in the Facebook groups. And during this launch, we weren't, because we were, our attention was focused on the launch. And Andrea, quietly, without being asked to do it, she just went 2 feet into those Facebook. She just cleaned it up every single day, all the questions.
She just saw that there was something that needed to be done. Didn't
And she
ask
did
if
it.
we
That
wanted
was
to do
it.
it, and she just
Right.
did it. Yeah.
Without
Uh,
without asking for acknowledgement, without asking
yeah.
for
She didn't
anything
even
in
tell us she did it.
return.
She just did it, and then
That's
just
right.
like went on with her day. And I was like, oh my god.
That's
Um,
exactly right. But you know
she
why? It is, yes, Andrea is amazing, and I don't want to take away from Andrea
right.
one bit. But also, I know that all the coaches would do that for you. All the coaches
Yeah.
would bend over backwards for you. You know why? Because that is how you lead internally. You are a giver inside the company too. You
Yeah.
give the coaches, you give from your time, you give your energy, you give your resources. So you lead by that example as well.
Yeah, and it's like if I'm gonna do that and you're not gonna reciprocate that, like then it's just there's got to be an equal exchange and equal balance, and that's why anytime Andrea texts me or boxers me with anything, I'm like, I'll just run to her that day as soon as I
Right.
can. Like I'll drop
Right.
whatever I'm in the middle of, and I'll respond back to whatever she needs. But Andrew was also the very one of the very first.
She
I think
was the
the
first
very
coach.
first student in the program. She was like
Yes.
when it was Video 4X. She was like the first person who ever signed up.
Yeah.
And then Beverly was like one of the first rounds of people into the mentorship program when we opened it
Mhm.
up. And then I don't know where Katie came in, to be honest. She's been around a long time too, but all three of them have been around for
Forever.
at
Susan too.
least, yeah, season 2, 4 or 5 years, probably. Yeah.
Easy. Yeah. The question I wanted to end this this discussion with you, actually, we kind of went into it inadvertently.
Mm.
But maybe you can expand a little bit on the
Wait, is
person.
this the last question?
Oh, okay. You want more? I have more.
It went by really
I don't
fast.
know. I figure
We
like
can do
the
more.
listeners are probably like dying. They're like, okay, enough.
I went by fast for me. We can do more. It's only an hour and 15 minutes.
Well,
Let's
okay.
do rapid fire. What are some like easy ones? Give me some what do they call them? Lob balls or whatever, or
Yes.
easy hits or whatever.
When are you opening a coffee shop?
Someone asked that. God, I know I've been talking about it for so long. I don't know. I want to though. It might end up being my retirement plan now. It's just hard because it just
That's
feels
a
like
bad retirement plan, man. Those are like not profitable.
really.
It's hard.
I
It's
talked
hard.
to a lot of people here who actually we almost bought one. So we were like this close to buying one here in Flagstaff called Single Speed.
Hmm.
Um, like my wife and I actually, Jacqueline went to dinner and we made the decision to buy it. And we're like, are we
Wow.
going to, let's do this. Cause she was looking for something to do too. The kids are back in school and she's like, oh, we could totally do this. She wants to like attach a bookstore to it.
Oh, yeah.
And all of this stuff. So we made the decision to do it. And then I started looking through, so I contacted the broker and we got the details and all of this stuff. And we started looking through the books and the numbers. And the asking price based off the numbers they didn't make any sense to me. I was like, this is like astronomical. Like this is, and I can't go through obviously the numbers and stuff because it's
Yeah.
whatever, non-disclosure, whatever, but it just didn't make any sense. And I'm like, this is so stupid because first of all, they're the best coffee shop in town, best by far. Like there's no comparison. They're just the best quality.
Yeah.
But they have this weird location, which is in the middle of freaking nowhere. It's not in downtown where all the coffee shops that are thriving are. It's where all the restaurants are. It's where all the tourism runs. They're just in this weird location. So I told Jacqueline, I was like, well, we're gonna have to keep that place as the roastery, and then we can keep it as kind of like a specialty bar. Like you come up for all of the new sort of drinks.
Yeah.
It's like the latte with like smoked bourbon mixed in it. Like we can do all these different like really cool. It's like almost like a mixery of like it's like specialty coffee bar, but it's roastery. But I'm like, we're gonna have to open a place in downtown. Like so we're gonna have to renovate. We're gonna have to open it up. Plus you have the cost. And we started looking at it. I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense because the numbers weren't great. And it was mostly because of the location. So we didn't end up doing it. And then, like with everything in the business over the last year, the business model, the things, it's like, it's stable, but it's not. And you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's like 1 month we have like, boom, awesome.
Yeah.
And then next month's like, okay, or we have like a salesperson quit. And then it's like we have to hire a new person. So I think once this current business is in a stage where it's like, pumping like we're at the 5 million and it's consistent and it's like not all of my time is totally wrapped into it. we would probably explore the idea of opening a coffee
Mm,
shop, because I don't want to treat it, if I'm going to do it, I don't want to treat it as this like little side project that's kind of like
yeah. No, it
kicking along. It's going to
advance.
require, it's another business, and it's going to
Yeah.
require me to treat it like another business. And until I get to a point where I have the energy and bandwidth to start another business, which eventually will run itself, there's no way I can do that.
Yeah.
So for right now, it's still just on the vision board. But I'm glad to call me out, because I do remember saying, if I don't have it by next year, call me out. And I'll
So
consider that being
people
called
are
out.
listening.
Yeah.
Yes. How many people do you estimate, or what's the percentage that you estimate of people who really succeed as online entrepreneurs versus how many just like give it a shot and give up?
Well, I just think it depends on what people think succeeding is, you know. I would say, let's just call succeeding doing it full time, like it's paying your bills and you're doing it
Mhm.
full time. Um, Not a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that, I would say 5 to 10% is probably my guess. And I will say that because you have a lot of people that start without really the full intention. It's kind of like, I'm interested in this. Let me see if I can make some money. And then they like, whatever. And they're not serious about it.
Yeah.
If we remove those people, and we
Mhm.
remove the people that just like started Instagram for like a couple weeks, you know, that weren't totally serious, never bought a course, never invested in a mentor. You remove all those people, I think it goes up. I think it's just a matter of time before you eventually hit it.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
I would say it's probably closer to like 30 or 40% would
Yeah.
be my guess. But again, it just goes back to what I just said about the coffee shop. You
Right.
got to treat it as it's a live or die
Right.
sort of thing. And that's why I'm not going to start a coffee shop, because if I do, I'm going to be fucking serious about it. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to be a real thing. And I think a lot of people come into this kind of going like, this would be nice. Whereas the people that come into it going like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I'm
Yes.
freaking committed to it, those people always succeed. And
That's
I
right.
think there's a lot of people that are not at that level yet, or maybe like, you know, their husband or wife kind of pays the bills, and this is kind of like a nice little side hobby project, and see if I can make some money with it. Um, like, I'm sorry, but that energy just doesn't
Right.
usually result in like
Yep.
ultra success here. Like for me, it was, this is my family's livelihood, and I'm just going to do whatever I need to do. And like, I'll work nights, I'll work weekends, I'll do whatever. I sacrifice time with the family in the first couple of beginning years of my kids' lives because of it. Which when I look back, I realized I didn't sacrifice as much as I thought I did. Um, but just felt like I was working all the time, you know. But I still made time for the family back then. But anyways, I think that's my long-winded answer to that question.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times I think going back to what you talked about earlier that surprised you in entrepreneurship, that you didn't understand fully that it was a journey in self-development. And I think few people do, because if I had told you 10 plus years ago, Brandon, you want to start this business, it's going to cause you multiple shamanic deaths. You're going to go through a ton of
Mm-hmm.
suffering. You're going to like not know how to get yourself out of this hole. You want to do that?
Yeah.
I don't know if you would have said yes, right?
I mean, to be honest, I ask myself this question a lot. It's like, had I known how hard and difficult this path would have been, not just for me, but for also Jacqueline,
Would you choose it?
I don't know if I would have chose it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Right.
Like I probably still would have, because I didn't have a college degree. I didn't know what else I was going to do for a career.
Yeah.
You know, I at one point wanted to be a fireman. Maybe I would have gone back and done that. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if I would have willingly been like, yep, let's do this. Like, you had told me when I left my dad's company, for the next 10 years, you're going to be broker than a joke. You're going to live with your in-laws.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any money. You're always going to be worrying about the bills being paid, but you'll make it eventually. But even when you start to make it, it's still going to be another 2 or 3 years of like really struggles. And then even after you make it, there's going to be really hard times where you're still worried about money. Like, is this what you want? And
Right.
I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. And you know what? There are still, I mean, at least for me, I still have to remind myself of my commitment, even inside my own business or just in general, as someone who, you know, who works for a living.
Mm-hmm.
I promised myself this was important enough for me to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes until it
Mm-hmm.
takes.
Right.
And that is what I'm committed to. It's the path. So, you know,
Yeah.
when we talk about how many people succeed, or what percentage succeed. I think it's the people who are committed to that.
Yeah.
And seeing a vision through, and seeing a journey through. Really, it's not so much about, am I going to build a 7-figure business or a 9-figure business, or like, of course I want those things. And I mean,
Right.
anyone who knows me knows that I love my 3D. I'm super in the 3D and I love it. But at the same time, this is a quest. It's an internal quest, and it is a journey back into yourself. And you have to choose that. There comes a point, whether you might have gotten into it not really knowing that that's where it was headed, but at some point you figure that out.
Right.
And then you have to make a conscious choice. Am I going to take this path wherever it goes?
Yeah. Well, I also just had the belief. I knew that I was going to be successful one day too. And that helped a lot. Like I just knew it to the core of my being.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't think I've ever told anyone this story before. This is a new story for the first time. When I first started the company, it was called Sold with Video, and we were selling real estate videos to listing agents. And we were doing like the video SEO on it and stuff like that. And so my marketing strategy back then was just to go into these like real estate forums and things like that to try to like drum up business and whatever. I didn't know what I was doing. Like I just wasn't getting any sales. I'm like, I have no idea how to run ads or marketing. I didn't know messaging. I didn't know anything. So I went to this site, which is actually really big now. And it was big back then too. It's called Bigger Pockets. And it's where a lot of people go. It's more for like, not really real estate agents, but more real estate investors. So people that are like flipping homes or buying, wholesaling homes and things like that. And I started to go to a lot of their marketing, threads, and I would post certain things. It was kind of one of those things where you try to mask it as value, but it's really just marketing.
Yes.
It's like, hey, inside my video SEO company, we've realized that like, real estate investors would really benefit from SEO. Have you guys thought about SEO? Stuff like that. But then the founders of the forum, like in front of the entire community, started screenshotting my stuff and go, this is not how you run a business. This is not how you market. This is not how you do whatever. And they didn't even like screenshot my name. It was just me at the top. It was like brand Lucero, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember being so embarrassed by that. And I was like, well, whatever. And I kind of shook it off. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? The day when my name is big and I'm huge and I made this, they're going to be like, oh, that's the guy that like in the forum that we called out, blah, blah, which by the way, if you ask them, they don't even probably remember calling me out. It's such a stupid, like egotistical thing.
Right.
But I remember, that was my belief back then, is like, no, I'm going to the top. Like this is happening. And I actually changed it around. So my next post inside the group was like, I said, I'm going to break down exactly how anyone in this forum can an SEO video to the top. Yes, I do it as a service, but I'm going to teach you how you can do it on your own without even needing to hire me. And I just broke down this. It was like an ebook as a post, and it blew the F up inside the group. Everyone was sharing it. Everyone was talking about it. The forum members, like the owners, actually messaged me and emailed me and were like, look, we know what you're doing. We know you're trying to drum up business from the group, but like people are loving this new thing that you're doing in the SEO. So we're going to let you keep doing it because it's adding value to the group. And I remember responding like, I don't really care. Like, thanks for the email, but like, if you don't want me to do it, then just block it. I don't need you to like give me your blessing to do it. Just fucking delete me and let me move on with my life. And then I did that whole post, and I actually generated business from it. And then I actually started getting messages from other people in the forum and in the group who were also teaching marketing. There's a lot of people in there that were doing that, like giving out these lessons. And a lot of people started to get threatened by it. And so a lot of people would message me that were doing that, saying, hey, you're a rising star in this group now. We just want to like, this is what we do. And then we see you doing the SEO stuff. We want to make sure that you stay in your lane and we stay in ours and blah, 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 blah. And I just remember thinking like, I don't give a fuck what you do. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Like if you're threatened by it, good, and it led to business. And then I eventually switched out of SEO for real estate people. It was a lot of work to keep writing content like that and then answering all the questions and stuff. Right. But it eventually became like one of the most popular posts inside the entire forum for a while. This is probably like 2010 or something like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I don't know why I got onto that topic. Oh, because that was my belief. My belief was, I'm going to get to the top at one point. Like there was, and that's the way I treated it, is like, there's no other way. I'm going to do it. And I was really naive to how hard, it was going to be in so many different ways,
But
but I
you
did
know
it.
what? Almost you have to have that voice somewhere in the back of your mind that tells you that you can do it against all the odds, because you kind of
Mhm.
almost have to have that insane, naive belief to get through
Right.
some of the parts that you need to get through.
Yeah, you do. Like, it's better not knowing sometimes.
It is better not. Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. There's a reason for that saying.
Yeah.
Like, I 100% believe that.
Yep.
It reminds me when I was a kid, when I was a teen, and I had this boyfriend who he was my first like boyfriend that I brought home to my parents.
Hmm.
And he was adorable. Like, we're still friends to this day. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And we dated for I don't know how many years, a few years. Everybody thought we were going to get married, including us.
Mm.
And I broke up with him. I
Mm.
broke up with him not because of there was nothing happened, but I broke up with him because I just knew. I knew this is not it. He's not the guy. He's wonderful, lovely, amazing human being. I have nothing but good things to say about him, but I knew he wasn't the guy, and I had to break up with him. And I remember my mom kind of telling me, listen, like, why'd you break up with him? And I told her, like, I didn't actually really have a good reason except for the fact that I just didn't think this was the one.
Yeah.
And she was giving me this lecture that I'm sure many of us have heard in one variation or another, that, there is no perfect guy, and you have to compromise in life, and you can't get everything you want. And
Mm-hmm.
going on about how marriage is compromised and life is compromised and all this like conditioning that she has, right?
Right.
And I
But there is truth in
remember
that too.
there is, but sure, I mean, as an adult I understand that, but as an 18-year-old at the time,
Yeah.
there was a voice in my head that said, well, what if I can have it all? What if I can? I'm gonna try and have it all. I'm gonna try and
Yeah.
have like the husband, like the quote unquote husband that I feel is, you know, everything
Here-
that I
Here's,
want, right?
here's the difference to me. It's yes, there's compromise in a marriage, but choosing the one you want to
Yeah,
compromise with.
that's not
And that's the
right.
thing. Like, this
That's
isn't the
not the
guy that I
compromise.
want to do the compromising with. Is
Right, right. There is compromise, but the person is not necessarily a compromise.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. That makes sense. Yep.
I was like, I am going to have it all. I'm going to have the career, and I'm going to have the money, and I'm going to have the husband, and I'm going to have the kids. And like, I'm not going to compromise. And there was
Yeah.
that, like you said, kind of that naive voice in my mind, that the voice that only an inexperienced young person can have, right?
Mm-hmm.
That voice that says, no, you can do it all, actually.
Yeah.
That made me believe that I could. And lo and behold, here we are, X decades later. And I feel like I do have it all. I
Yeah.
genuinely feel that.
Yeah.
So
You do. The
that's
girl who
my
has it
mom.
all.
Okay, so I have another kind of
Sure.
question about building a business through paid traffic, as we do. We rely on, or I won't say we rely on it, but we use it a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the biggest challenge growing your business using paid traffic, using ads? And do you see the ROI on that declining, rising, or how has that been?
I see the ROI on it inclining, like increasing.
Increasing. Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I look at people like Catherine Zinkina,
Yeah,
Manifestation Babe, and she spends like peanuts on
zero.
ads.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very small. And she has like I don't know, 7, 8, whatever $1 million a year business, and just has
Right.
this massive organic audience. But then if you go up to her and I go, Catherine, how are you going to grow it from 7 to 8? Can you do that within a year? She's like, I don't know. Like, I guess I got to grow my audience more. It's like, okay, so this audience that it's taken you 10 years to build, you're just going to grow it in a year then? Like, is that
Right.
what we're doing here? And so again, this isn't like one's better than the other. You need both. I always describe it as like a bicycle. You could have one wheel pumped up and the other one flat, and yeah, you're going to move forward, but you're not going to move forward as fast as if they were both working, which is why I think you need both. And that's one of the focuses, hopefully, that we have in 2024 is how do we increase our organic? Our organic has actually increased a lot. Like every time like 4 years ago when Taylor was still here, we would send an email out to our launches and we get like 200 people registered for something, even though our list was like 40,000. Now we get like 1,000 to 2,000 people. Like every time we email something out or make it something on the podcast, it's like people line up. So it is growing. It's not reflective in our likes on Instagram on posts, but it is reflective on our email list. It is reflective on like how many people respond to our emails and things like that. So again, I don't remember what the original question is, but I do see it increasing. I do see it as really important. I do think it speeds up a lot. It speeds up a lot of testing. It speeds up a lot of whatever. But the hardest part about it is also really expensive. So when we go into a launch and we do $1.2 million, take 200 right off the top because that's what we spent on ads. Like Catherine doesn't have to do that. Catherine does a $3 million launch. She's not skimming 500,000 off the top in ads. She's keeping it all. They just did this promotion on this new $97 offer and they did 250,000 in sales. And I was like, that's awesome. And then my mind goes, yeah, but how much was in ads? I'm like, oh, 0. It's like, oh, that's really cool. So I think there's a benefit to both. I do think it just speeds up stuff. So if you're like sitting there struggling to get any momentum, you're like, no one's paying attention to my stuff. Well, yeah, work on your messaging, but then get the messaging out there with ads. And if you know what you're doing, you get going really fast. And I'll just say this, if I started over from the beginning on a brand new product, brand new whatever, and someone said, get $2 million as fast as you can, the first thing I would be doing is setting up ads before I even create an offer, like a course or a program. I would be, bam, get ads up, get them to a webinar. Let's sell them something, whether it's a one-on-one service or a pre-launch or something, it would be ads for sure. 100%.
That was literally my next question was, if you were starting all over, what is the first thing you would do? And you just answered it.
Set up ads and run it to an offer. That's what I would do. I mean, and again, it comes with all this experience. We've run millions of dollars in ads profitably over the years. So it's like, I'm coming in with experience. I wouldn't even hesitate to put $20,000 on a credit card just to run ads to a webinar, to an offer that I could sell. I know we would make money. So that's what I would do first. So
that was going to be another question I had to you is like, now when we go into a launch, let's say we do our next launch, we're going to put out, I don't know, $200,000 in ads, whatever it is, hundreds of thousands of dollars in ads. Do you still have that moment of what if we don't make it back?
Of course. Like, how can you not have that feeling?
I don't know.
At least for a little bit, I would have that feeling. Any launch we've done, I've never not made the money back, so it's a little bit crazy that I still have those thoughts.
Yep.
Actually, no, I take it back. It's not, will I make the money back? It's more along the lines of, will we make enough money to sustain the company profitably for like the next launch or whatever it is. That's more of my concern, than it is losing the money. So, cause the launches for us is like, we want the launches to be icing on the cake. And that's why we went this evergreen model. And I think we're like almost there, like right there, like, I don't know, did in October, but 120,000 on evergreen or something. And like, if we did that every month, that's great. That's enough to like keep the company running profitably. And then the launches become icing on the cake. But when the launches aren't icing on the cake and they are the bread and butter, there's always that concern of, are we going to do enough to sustain the company profitably until the next one? And there have been times where that has not been the case. I can think of two specifically. One when Taylor was here, and the last one was right after she left. There was 2 times where that happened. And ironically, it was the same reason why both times. It's just, didn't learn my lessons, I guess, the first time, but yeah.
It was because of it was the messaging, right? Or no?
Messaging and arrogance. Like it was just more of messaging, arrogance, intention, laziness. So the very first time was when we did a launch and it was 400,000 and I had to give, like affiliate payouts and ad spend and all that stuff. And we did well with it. It was like our first, I think the only launch we had done before that had hit 50,000. So to go from like 50 to 400 was a quantum leap. It was awesome.
Right.
And then I was like, wait, let's do it again in 6 months. And we did it again. And I just remember thinking, God, we're going to make so much money. There's going to be no affiliate payouts on this thing. Let's just rinse and repeat. Let's not change anything. Let's just go do this. Let's spend more on ads. And my focus was just like money, 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 sales, sales, sales. We're going to make so much money. Oh my God. Like I'm going to finally be able to get my Ferrari and blah, 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 blah. And then we did $180,000 on that launch, which again, I know those are great numbers, but when we had employees, then we had all this stuff then. And then I think we probably spent like $80,000 on ads. So we barely made back what we were going to earn. And then that payment plans barely even paid, like it covered the bills, if it even did at all. That was one of the times. So a lot of lessons there. And then on this last one where we did 340,000, wasn't enough to pay the bills for 6 months, but that wasn't arrogant. I wasn't in arrogance. And I think I've shed a lot of that. That was more of just like rinse and repeat. Don't train. Like the energy is just not there. It was like, anytime I put my heart and soul into something, we do really well. And the second I get lazy and just rinse and repeat it, let's just collect some money sort of attitude, even though I wasn't about the money. It was like, I still want to help people. And it just always kind of whatever. And the messaging hadn't changed in like 3 years. Everything was just the rinse and repeat. And it was just lazy.
You know, we talk a lot of times about the fact that it's not all, it can't be all strategy and it can't be all mindset, and it has to be, you know, some kind of combination between the two of not mindset specifically, but more of like just you really knowing who you are, remembering who you are, and bringing that out in your messaging, and then layer strategy on top of that.
Right.
And I feel like for you, when there's been a mismatch there, when it's been mostly strategy, there have been times where it's been more strategy and less of you like really being inspired. It affects the launch. And on the flip side, when you do come in fired up about messaging or a specific angle that we go into a launch with, like this most recent boot camp that we ran, like it wasn't even a launch necessarily. It wasn't like this big drawn out thing, but your inspiration, your passion, you were fired up when you wrote that messaging doc. And when I read it, I could feel it. I could feel your energy of like being fired up. And I think that's why it just was like, it was easy. It was easy to pull off. The sales they just came in.
It was new. It was like, it got me thinking of like, how do I want to teach this different? And that's what I love. I love like one of the things I realized and I've told people is like, one of the reasons why I make more money is because I became a 10 times more effective teacher. And I love getting up there and just being a very effective teacher and blowing people's minds. And I know how to connect the dots. I know where they're at and where I want them to be. And I know the ahas I want to give them. And it's just fun. I just love doing it. And so when I created it, it was just a lot of fun, and we did really well. And anytime we get into the space, we do really well. My next goal, if you're listening, is I need to incorporate more of Matt into the creative side of it. And when you put us two together, it's like, you know, gasoline and fire. Like when we created our video series, I think that was our first $1 million launch we've ever done. The team put their heart and soul in it for 4 months or more, you know. We traveled all over California filming it. It was fucking awesome. It was a pain in the ass. And I told the team I never want to do this again because it was so energy draining, but it was freaking awesome. And
wait, so are you saying you want to do it again?
No, definitely. I don't want to do a video series launch. I'm kind of over those. They're live launches, but we can incorporate video series elements into a live launch, like video intros and like, all right, I'm gonna teach you guys this thing and here's a video to explain it. And then like goes to this amazing, beautiful video. We can do stuff like that. I think that's the next phase of style of launching. And I think I always kind of want to be at the forefront of these sort of things. I just saw in their stories, James has his videographer, Ryan from Europe in town. And I'm like, if those a-holes are running with my idea to do this thing, I'm gonna flip some shit.
But here's the good news. James launches in June.
I know.
And we're gonna launch before. So we're good. We're good. James, if you're listening.
He doesn't listen. It's too good. This podcast
he never
is
listens.
too good for him.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So, you know, we talked about what's your possible next level. What's your next goal in the company? We talked about maybe your next level in business. We talked about the things you can't see. What's your next level in life?
Yeah, I don't know. Just to be a dad,
Yeah.
um, be a husband. I don't know. Like everything's been so uprooted over the last 2 or 3 years. It's been hard. And a lot of just things I was familiar with and things that I enjoyed are no longer here. I don't know. It was like I just had this amazing life in 2018, 2019. The business was trucking along. I wasn't working. I was home with the kids all the time, loved where we lived and all that stuff. And then COVID happened, and it was like, I hated seeing all the stuff that was happening in California. I hated, like, especially with my kids and in school. And it was like, I don't want to get into the politics of everything, but it was like, still seeing my kids in masks 3 years after stuff. It was like, the hell is going on? Like, let these kids breathe for a minute, and like, whatever, if you don't want to have your kids in masks, then like, don't send them to school. That's fine. Like, you have that right, but to like force everyone to do it and just all this stuff, it was just like, oh man. And there's no end in sight. And so we ended up leaving. And that was one of the reasons. It wasn't the only reason. It was like, taxes were getting freaking crazy. The area we lived in, that we grew up in, was not the same. It was getting a lot of more LA traffic. There was a lot more homeless there. It's kind of a funny story, but maybe it's too much TMI. But I remember the moment where I'm like, this is enough, was drive. And we live in Thousand Oaks, like Newbury Park, which is really nice. It's like right next to Westlake, so right outside of Malibu. Like, it was a nice area, very upscale. I'm driving down the freeway, and homelessness was becoming a problem. Like, there's camps all over the place. You could see it off the side of the freeway and stuff. And I remember driving my kids to school. It's beautiful sunrise. It was just awesome. The hills were glowing. And then there's a homeless guy squatting, taking a shit on the side of the freeway. And Lily's like, what's that guy doing? I'm like, oh, nothing. Let's look at the sunset over here. And I'm like, man, this is enough. Like, that's it. And so when we left, we just like left everything behind, and we're still adapting. We're still kind of like figuring out our way and figuring out like, what do we do in our rhythm and all that stuff. When we had all of that back home, and then it just like COVID just totally, like, I'm sure the same for many people, like totally uprooted it. So for me, I'm just going day by day. I don't know what's going to happen in my personal life. I don't know. I don't have any vision for my personal life other than just being like the best dad, like if I took business out of the equation, I just want to, like, especially with COVID too, there was no like traveling, there's no this, there's no that. And I'm like, we don't have any restrictions right now. Like, I just want to live day by day, be present, and like, let's go have fun. We just went to Hawaii a little while ago. We're talking about taking another vacation. We're like, let's just go live. Let's just go live our life and have as much fun as we can, because I don't know, there could be another sort of like mandate, another sort of like COVID sort of thing that happens in the next couple of years. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone, but the state of the world is in pretty much chaos. Inflation is crazy. Housing prices, I don't understand how we have not seen a big blowout on that yet, So I just think there's a lot of potential things to just be a disruption again, like COVID was. And so in the current moment, I'm like, while that's not here, let's just go live our life, and maybe nothing will happen. I don't know. But I will never look back and go, oh, you shouldn't have spent all those vacations thinking something's going to happen. You shouldn't have been so present thinking those things are going to happen. You shouldn't be having so much fun thinking those things are going to happen. It was, it was more of a wake up call. So for me in my personal life, I think that's just kind of what I'm doing, is just like, just going to grow, have fun, enjoy my family, enjoy my friends, and that sort of thing.
Love it. I can share with you something that has helped me as I've gone through lots of transitions in my life, and the move that you speak of, like, that's a huge transition, because not only did you move states, but yes, you moved states, but also you moved from a place where, like you mentioned, you'd grown up there your whole life.
Yeah, that's all I knew.
Right. And it's not like you had lived in 20 different places, and so like, okay, here's another move. This was a huge move for you and your family. And I've gone through transitions like that in my life. And what has helped me kind of reframe is that, every time I feel like I've lost something, I have to remind myself that I haven't. I haven't lost anything because I didn't have anything. So
Yeah.
all I have, my belief system, that all I have is within me. Everything is
Right.
internal. And I have that still. I haven't lost any of that. And yes, there are things on the outside, on the external, in the 3D, there are things I have lost. There are people I have lost.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, in order to release my attachment from those losses, what I've had to remind myself of is that I don't lose myself. That's the thing I hang on to in the midst of everything else falling apart, going away, leaving, people leaving. That's the thing I hold on to. So
Yeah.
that's just came up for me as you were saying that.
Yeah. I love that. And I do have to, remind myself of that. Cause the thing is like, we liked where we lived,
Yeah.
we loved it. I really enjoyed living in Newbury Park. And it was like,
Yeah.
let's just pretend nothing had happened, like everything was the way it was 5 years ago.
You'd still be
Would
there.
I rather be here? There, I'd rather be there. I just enjoyed it. I loved it,
Yeah.
And I think that's what made it really hard was it just felt like we eventually reached a point where I'm like, this doesn't make sense anymore. This is not how we want to like live. This is not the sort of thing we want to live. This is, and I was kind of worried, like, does it get any worse than this? I don't know,
Right.
so it's just, that sort of thing. But, but I also have to remind, like what you said is like, it's still within me. I'm still me. But the beautiful part is I'm also in a lot of gratitude because I'm like, we can go back anytime we want. Like we have the means of time and freedom to like just rent a house for a month and just go live there.
Right.
Like, and Jacqueline and I are talking about that. Like, why don't we just like go live in different places for a couple months? Like, why not? This is what we talked about when we started the business in the first place. And we finally can go do that. And so I'm also just reframing it as like, this just also opens up so much more opportunity. Just by moving here in taxes alone, we save $50,000 a year. So it's like, what if we spent that 50,000 on just like traveling and having fun? So there's a lot of good with it as well.
Right. And the parts about Thousand Oaks and Newbury Park that you love, you experienced those things there because those things exist within you.
Mm-hmm.
You know how we always say that like what we see in other people is really, we see it because it exists in us, for good or for bad. And the same is true about places. When we feel a connection to a place, it's because it's something within us that got stirred up. So you have that. You have that beauty, those beautiful hills, the rolling hills, the glowing hills, like the feelings that brings up in you when you experience it in the physical realm, like it's in you. And you can always go back to it, like even right now,
Yeah, of course. It was really interesting too. Like right before we left, everything got stripped away before we even made the decision to go and move. Everything got stripped away from us. It was also like the universe being like, you guys got to go, or the opportunities are like friends that we've had for years. All of a sudden we just didn't connect with anymore. We didn't, whatever. There were a lot of people, that just like fell apart, or like friend breakups happened and just things like that, it was just like, I never really had a lot of friends back home because a lot of them either went to college or whatever. And then I just grew apart from a lot of them as well. And I'm fine with that because I had my internet friends. Like James
that's what my husband calls them too, internet friends.
Internet friends. And I was fine because by the time I got done with work, I'm like, I don't want to go hang out with anyone. I want to go mountain biking and have my alone time and stuff. But it was really hard for Jacqueline because a lot of her friends, we both got to a point where like, we don't have any friends here anymore. Like they're all gone, and then her parents couldn't retire because it's too expensive, and they could retire if we moved. So we're like, let's all do this. So they moved with us. So it was like, let's do this. You guys can retire and we can find a new place to live. And it's been good. It's been awesome to see her parents like just totally embrace in retirement. They're over at our house all the time. They help out with stuff. They babysit. Her mom comes over and helps us with laundry. And they're just, so happy to be able to just spend so much time with their grandkids. And Jacqueline's just kind of like, mind's blown because she's like, I don't understand who these people are, because those are not the parents I had. They're like she'll watch her mom get on the floor and color with Maddie, our 4-year-old, which I laughed at. You did a post the other day, which was like a haunted house, but you're pretending like you like playing dolls with your daughter. I'm like, oh, so relevant. but she doesn't. Jacqueline's like, I would have killed for my mom to be able to do that with me, but she didn't, because she's like, I got to clean the kitchen, I got to clean the dishes, I got to go
Yeah,
blah, 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 blah.
right.
And so she's like, I don't understand who these people are, but I'm so grateful my kids have that experience, and they live like 10 minutes down the road from us. So there's
Amazing.
been a lot of good with it as well.
They say that grandparenthood is like your opportunity to correct all the mistakes you made when you were raising your own kids, because you also had to pay the bills and do all the things and you were under stress. And now you don't have to do that with your grandkids. And then you get to have like a second chance. And I see that with my parents too, the way they show up for my children. I also look at it and I'm like, first of all, who are these people? So patient, so compassionate, so understanding, like never ever raise their voice, like always say yes to everything, yes and more. They're like the yes grandparents. And I'm like, are we related? Like, are these the same people who raised
going on
me?
here?
Right. But then at the same time, I'm like, I'm so happy for them, because I know that this is their way to indirectly kind of make amends, to say, I wish I could have shown up like this for you when you were a kid and I couldn't, but I'm going to show up like this for you, for your
That's
children.
beautiful. Yeah. I love that. My goal, I know it's impossible. My goal is for my kids to be like, how you are as a grandparent is exactly how you were with us. I know that's impossible. Maybe it's not, I don't know, but that's something, because I remember thinking that I'm like, why can't we be like that now? Why can't we?
We can. We can. Well, I mean, what we can't do is like spend 24/7 with our kids playing, because we do have to work and pay the bills. Like there are things that we have to do that as grandparents we don't.
But grandparents don't play like my kids' grandparents don't play with them 24/7.
No, no, I don't.
I play and spend more time with my kids than their grandparents do. I think it's just more about the quality of it, and it's
you know what it is? It's the state you're in when you're with them. Because like my parents, when they're with my kids, they're fully present.
They're so happy.
They're so happy. They're happy to do the mundane things. They're happy to drop them off. They're happy to pick them up. They're happy to give them dinner, right?
That's
like they're happy to do the things that for us, we're like, oh, I have to do school.
They're happy to go do Play-Doh and the drawings and the paintings and the Barbies and the doll houses and stuff, where us, it's like, oh my God, I got so much to do. And you sit down and you do it.
Yes.
But you're 100% right. It's totally the state.
Yes. So
nailed it.
It's actually not my goal that my kids say that the way I grandparent is how I parented. I hope I'm a better grandparent than how I am as a parent. No, honestly, because I hope I continue to evolve. I hope I can show up better.
I'm already evolved, though, Rachel.
What was that?
I'm already evolved, though. So
yes, you're fully evolved. You can only devolve.
just in that statement, you can tell I'm not evolved.
Maybe you're going to regress.
Yeah, we'll see. Oh, man.
Brandon, I want to say thank you to you for having this platform. I want to congratulate you for reaching this milestone. It's amazing. And for doing what you do in the world. Yeah. And for being the person you are, and the role model that you are, and the boss that you are, and the friend that you are, and the mentor that you are. And I want to thank you for letting me be here today and kind of ask the questions, the burning questions that everyone has. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing that. And I appreciate you becoming our COO. It's been awesome. And I'll be honest, I just thought it was an impossible feat to do. Like, I'm like, there's no way in hell. Right. But I'm like, but she's the person. Like, that's it. I know it's Rachel. And so thank you for that. And thank you for doing this interview. And thank you for everything. I'm really grateful and appreciate it. Me too. A lot. So with that, I think we'll wrap up here. Cool. Thank you guys. If you guys made it this far, we're 2 hours in. Like, you guys are amazing. Thank you. And we'll catch you on another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. And if you guys like these episodes where Rachel interviews me, just send her more questions and we can do another one. It's so much better being interviewed on your own podcast than having to hold the weight of the episode on your shoulders. The burden of responsibility, man. So
let us know, submit those questions, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Take care, everyone. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.